A biomechanical analysis of a forehand winner down the line in tennis by Valeria Arevalo. The first video is of Simona Halep's forehand winner down the line during one of her practices at Indian Wells 2019. Simona Halep starts her stance face on a ready position. Her back is bent forward and her shoulders are protracted. She starts with both elbows flexed. Her right elbow is flexed at 119 degrees while her left elbow is flexed at 104 degrees. Her knees are also slightly flexed, both of them flexed at a 146-degree angle. For her preparatory phase, Simona is rotating her hips, trunk, and shoulders in order to get in a sideways position to gain more momentum before the stroke. Her right elbow is extended from 119 degrees in the stance phase to 157 degrees in the preparatory phase. This happens in order to create a bigger movement arm and increase the linear velocity of the racket when swinging. Her right shoulder abducts from 0 to a 63-degree angle and her knees slightly flex to 142 on the right and a 119-degree angle on the left leg. During the contact phase, the athlete rotates her body back to the initial position with the purpose of using not only the strength of her arms but also the momentum of her rotation and the ground force obtained by her legs. Her right shoulder is still abducted, but it slightly decreases the angle. Due to the position of the camera, it's difficult to calculate this angle change. Her right elbow flexes compared to the preparatory phase, going from 157 to 123 degrees of flexion. This flexion occurs to add more stability to the elbow, to have a more accurate stroke and decrease tennis elbow injuries. Her knees extend in comparison to the stance phase. This knee extension occurs to transfer the energy that was accumulated by stretching the quadriceps in the knee flexion of the previous phase. During this phase, the athlete plantar flexes both of her ankles. They move from a neutral 90-degree angle to 110 degrees on the right ankle and 113 degrees on the left ankle. This motion occurs also to transfer greater amount of ground force into the stroke. During the follow-through phase, Simona finishes the rotation of her body slightly facing to her left side. Her right elbow flexes compared to the contact phase, changing from 121 to 92 degrees. During this phase, both shoulder motions can be observed. Her right shoulder abducts to finish at a 127-degree angle. On the other side, her left shoulder adducts to finish at a 40-degree angle. It can be evidenced during this phase that the athlete's left leg is supporting her body. For this reason, the angle is greater on this leg compared to the right leg, with 151 degrees compared to a 139-degree angle. The subject being observed is a 22-year-old college tennis player. She has been playing tennis since she was 5 years old and has played competitively for more than 10 years. The video was recorded at her college tennis courts during one of her spring practices. During the video, she was already warmed up and ready to perform the next shot. In the stance phase, she starts with both of her shoulders adducted and in a neutral and relaxed position. This starting position is very similar to the one of the perfect performer. Her right elbow is bent at a 114-degree angle and her left elbow is bent at a 106-degree angle. Compared to the perfect performer, there is not a significant difference in elbow flexion. The subject has her right knee flexed at a 125-degree angle and her left knee flexed at a 111-degree angle. There is a slight difference in knee flexion angles of the subject and the perfect performer due to the difference in the shot that they are receiving. During the preparatory phase, the subject also rotates her hip, trunk, and shoulders to the right. She also abducts her shoulder up to a 67-degree angle. This angle is slightly greater compared to the perfect performer, but it does not have a great impact in the outcome of the shot. One of the biggest differences between the subject and the perfect performer is the elbow flexion angle in this phase. The subject's right elbow flexes and decreases the angle up to 84 degrees of flexion. This motion is completely opposite to the perfect performer's motion. Instead of flexing, she is extending her elbow, finishing at a 157-degree angle. This difference in joint angle affects the subject's performance by decreasing the movement arm. When decreasing this distance, not only the angular velocity for this motion will be smaller, but also the linear speed of the racket will be significantly smaller compared to the perfect performer. This will decrease the velocity and the force applied to the ball. Knee flexion for this phase is also different between the subject and the perfect performer. The right knee is flexed at 124 degrees. On the other side, the left knee extends going from up to 141 degrees. The subject and the perfect performer left knee motions are slightly different when compared from the stance phase to the preparatory phase, but overall they end up having similar final angles. In the contact phase, the subject being observed rotates her body to the left to transfer all the energy into the stroke. Her right elbow extends, going from 84 degrees to 117 degrees. Despite the difference in elbow flexion in the previous phase, the elbow extension of the subject is very similar to the perfect performers during this phase. Both of the subject's knees extend from the preparatory phase to the contact phase, creating a greater force transfer from the floor into the ball. Another big difference observed during this phase is the plantar flexion motion of both players. The subject being observed has her right ankle on the floor with a plantar flexion of only 6 degrees, whereas her left ankle is in a 131-degree plantar flexion. The perfect performer, on the other side, has both of her ankles in an evident plantar flexion of 113 and 110 degrees. This difference is not only a matter of style, but it also has a great impact in the force transfer from the ground to the ball. During the follow-through phase, the subject's final shoulder abduction has a 116-degree angle. This motion compared to the perfect performer is different because the perfect performer ends with a greater shoulder abduction, generating more angular displacement and thus more force. The subject's right elbow flexes in comparison with the contact phase, decreasing the angle from 117 to 64 degrees. A big difference between the subject and the perfect performer is observed during this motion as well. The subject ends the movement in a greater elbow flexion compared to the perfect performer, creating a greater angular displacement and thus a bigger angular velocity, compensating for the decrease in velocity due to the lack of displacement of the shoulder abduction. A similarity in both the subject and the perfect performer is the use of the left leg as a support and balance during this phase. The subject has her knee more extended during this phase. Even though both players are using the left leg for support, the subject being observed extends her left knee compared to the perfect performer, which flexes her knee. A final difference is observed in the right feet displacement. The subject leaves her feet in the same position while the perfect performer displaces her feet forward, creating a greater transfer of energy during this movement. The athlete was instructed to extend her elbow in the preparatory phase, relax her feet in order to allow a greater plantar flexion in both feet during the contact phase, and displace her right feet forward in the follow-through phase. There are more corrections that need to be done, but these are the greater differences and should be corrected before moving into the other small details.